Dark Side of the Moon, track uno. It's called Speak to Me. And really, it's just a heartbeat. That's the only thing that's important about it, Speak to Me, is it's a heartbeat and it's an overture. It's a trick that I learned from the classical composers. They sometimes do something at the beginning of a long piece that they call the overture, which is little bits from the various movements, if it's a symphony or something. Dark Side of the Moon Redux, as we now call it, has got some words over track one. And they are the lyrics of an old song that I recorded many years ago called Free For, Memories of a Man in His Old Age and the Deeds of a Man in His Prime. You shuffle in the gloom of the sick room and talk to yourself as you die. It's a perfectly apt beginning to this record because it starts to explain a little bit of what the whole record is about, A, and B, that I'm remaking it when I'm 79 years old, when I wrote the whole thing when I was 29 years old, so that's a 50-year gap. There's also a reference in the new Speak to Me, which is somewhere near the end of the old song Free For, which is, you are the angel of death and I am the dead man's son. He was buried like a mole in a foxhole and everyone's still on the run, which is a very important lyric from that song because it shows I was having the same kind of thoughts and feelings about being alive in the predicament that all of us human beings find ourselves in, writing Free For, as I was when I was conceptualizing Dark Side of the Moon. The song Breathe follows on from Speak to Me. You know, you're born and you're that horrible little well, they're not all horrible, don't get me wrong. There's nothing wrong with a baby, is there? But they are hard work. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. There they are and they're going, you know, who's that? That's your mum. Oh, and why am I here? And it all starts. It all started when they're in the womb, which of course is where we came in. What's the first thing that you hear when you're an embryo? Ba-boom, 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 ba-boom. You hear mother's heartbeat. That's your first experience. And you feel, hopefully, safe, warm, and surrounded by all good stuff. And then, there you are. And you take that first breath, and what's the first thing you do? You express feelings about the fact that you're no longer in that same place that you were in at the beginning. So the song Breathe, which is the first real song, is an admonition to that newborn by me, the old bloke, the 79-year-old, that it's important to grasp that as far as we know, you only get one go at this being alive business. Of course, the Buddhists and the Hindus and people think you get many, many goes at it. I don't subscribe to that view myself, but they may be right. Who knows? How is one to know such a thing? You can either read what people before you have written down and take it at face value and believe it, which I think many human beings do, much to their personal detriment, only if you ride the tide and balanced on the biggest wave you raise to. So that is just a warning, all right? Red flag, red flag. Do not listen to all those self-help gurus who tell you how to succeed. What was that arsehole's name? Tony somebody or other. I can see his face now. Tony Robbins, you're the bloke. You know, tall, upstanding, look as if you've been to the gym a lot, explaining to us how we can be successful in our lives and blah, blah, blah. And of course, it's all bullshit. It doesn't help you at all. That is giving you the instruction to climb on the biggest wave and ride it and be like a superhero and make a lot of money and be a huge success and blah and blah. And what it does is you race, as I say in the song, towards an early grave. Because it is not life affirming, it is life denying to buy into any of that bullshit. In my view, Tony, you know. On the Run, well, interestingly enough, it was originally called the travel sequence because it is about the futile headlong rush to what one might perceive as being important goals, mainly to do with amassing wealth, or even just making a living. The synthesizer thing, which is made on a Synthia, not a VCS3, ladies and gentlemen, for those of you anoraks out there who care about these things. That was the first kind of synthesizer that had a sequencer in it. So you could put in a sequence of notes, which is what I did, and then you could speed it up, which is why it goes like that, and gives you this sense of a never-ending, continuous, like life is circuit training at a very high speed. In the new version, I have expounded upon that notion by it being about a dream that I had. The text that is behind on the run now is text that I scribbled down the morning after I had the dream about being engaged in all my anxieties, about being locked into that futile scrabble. Which brings us to time. No one told you when to run. You missed the starting gun. I was 29 years old, and I suddenly had the realization that my life had started and that I was in the middle of it, when I had been under the misapprehension that, yes, my life had started. You know, I'd heard mother's heartbeat, I'd been born, I'd breathed in the air and whatever, but I thought that I was preparing for something that was going to start later. Oh, you must study hard at school, you have to go to university, you have to get your A-levels, you've got to do this and that, because you're preparing for something. And suddenly there I was, and I thought, fuck me, this is it. I'm not preparing for anything, I'm living something. The reprise of the song Breathe, which starts off home, home again, I like to be there when I can. And when I come home cold and tired, I like to warm my bones beside the fire. And far away across the fields, the tolling of the iron bell calls the faithful to their knees to hear the softly spoken magic spells. Those couplets are a cynical reading of all organized religions' dogmas, which all promise us something in the afterlife. And who knows? It's one of the great conundrums of life, is whether or not there is an afterlife. I don't believe there is, because I'm an atheist. It's an eternal dreamless sleep. I believe that when human beings die, they lose their consciousness. You're no longer conscious. So what defines our lives, our short lives on earth, is the fact that we are conscious. There is a notion of I, me. I am an entity. I know I am because I'm conscious. I have formed the view through my life that the metaphysical messages that we've received from the organizers of religion have by and large been softly spoken magic spells. And they don't have much to do with the reality of how it feels to be alive. People who are theist, believe in gods or a god, will often say, how can you possibly have a moral compass if you don't have a deity to follow and to bow down to? You can't. Well, that's always seemed to me a somewhat ludicrous idea. I tell you how. You feel it. You know when you're doing the right thing and when you're doing the wrong thing. You can feel it, particularly if you've educated yourself to understand even a little bit about human history and about how other people feel. That's the important thing. The important thing is to be able to empathize with their predicament. The Great Gig in the Sky is about the possibility of an afterlife. And that is why the voiceover to the new Redux version of Great Gig in the Sky is a real story about me and a great friend of mine, and his death, the death of a friend. And his name is Donald Hall, and he's a poet laureate of the United States of America for however long it was. I had lunch with him one day when I went up there with a friend of mine, the film producer, Bob Shea, and I met Donald, and we hit it off like that, and we became friends, and I only ever saw him again once after that. I sat with him for about 40 minutes, and then he got cancer and he died. I read his book, Essays After 80. There is only one road. It's in the lyrics that I put onto the new Redux version of the thing. There is only one road, and it's the road that I describe in The Dark Side of the Moon. It's from the ba-boom, ba-boom, ba-boom of the womb to whatever the end is. It's actually, the end is Eclipse, and the eclipse is the ending of light. Where did money come from? Well, I've told the story very often, I think, and that is, I'm sitting on the tube one day, and there was an advert for something or other, and it had written a good job in like truncated words up above the seats of the people sitting up. Get a good job with more pay and you're okay, which is a lyric in the song. And I thought, wow, and that's so. Why did I start playing a riff in 7/8? I've no idea. But there is a demo, and it's me playing an acoustic, a Spanish guitar, and singing the song over it. So I wrote it with a Spanish guitar. Obviously, it just falls naturally into the story from Breathe, On the Run, Time, Great Gig in the Sky, The Crossroads. All of us at some point in our life get to stand at the crossroads and decide which path to take. Are we going to follow avarice or love? Money is a kind of very direct evocation of that dilemma. And then there's a poem over I think it's where both the saxophone solo and the guitar solos were. I think it goes over most of that bit. And it's a poem, and it's called The Heavyweight. I mean, I wrote it umpteen years ago, like at least 10 years ago, probably longer than that. And so some of you will know who I'm talking about. Anyway, the less said about that, the better. Money, it is what it is. I still like the song. The riot scene from Zabriskie Point, which was a soundtrack that we made for Michelangelo Antonioni in 1970 in Cinecittà in Rome. Rick came up with a piano piece 2 or 3 years later when we were making Dark Side of the Moon. I remembered that piece, so I went over to Rick one day and went, "Oi, wake up!" And he went, "What?" And I went, "That piece of music you wrote called The Riot Scene, right, piano piece, what about it?" I said, "I'm going to write a song called Us and Them for Dark Side of the Moon. Can I use your chords?" "All right." So I did. So that's a joint composition with me and Rick, and I'm so glad he did, because they're great chords, and it turned into a really wonderful song about the central idea on this record, really, which is the requirement that we empathize with all our brothers and sisters all over the world, irrespective of their ethnicity or religion or nationality, because therein lies the possible hope of salvation for the whole human race. So thank you, Rick. I'm so glad we managed that one great collaboration. After all, we're only ordinary men, me and you. It's not what we would choose to do. Yeah, so yeah, forward he cried, from the rear and the front rank died. It says it's all, and it talks about war in the third verse as well, when it says with, without, and who'll deny it's what the fighting's all about. So all of these wars that we've lived through, certainly since the Second World War, are about the futile scrabble for power and wealth and hubris and hegemony. And they're all about empire. and they're all about getting more of the cake. Let us not share the cake, the bounty of this planet Earth that is home to all of us. And that's what Us and Them is about. Down and out. It can't be helped, but there's a lot of it about. It can be helped, it could be helped. It's really easy to help it. All you need is a welfare state. All you need is to stop spending all the money that you spend on killing brown people in foreign lands and spend it on looking after people in your own country or other countries who need your help. Any colour you like. The phrase of the title is the saying of a roadie, and the saying would be, any colour you like, they're all blue. It ticked off in my brain when we were making this Redux thing, the whole thing about a flag and the colour of flags, blue and yellow, obviously a reference to Ukraine, or red, could be Russia, might be, or black, who knows, pirates, I've no idea. Rainbow. Obviously, it's in people's minds now because it's quite close to the front of all our experience of life now that we're beginning to think about sexuality in healthier ways than we were in the dark ages. Some of us still are, in dark societies. And there are some societies which are darker than others where we make judgments about people based upon how they feel about their own sexuality. And we shouldn't. We should accept that we should live under a rainbow flag. I'm very against countries' flag. Nationality is a malign influence on most of our lives. Which brings us to Brain Damage, which was one of the probably the first song that I wrote for Dark Side of the Moon was probably Brain Damage. It contains the title of the record. The end of it is, if the band you're in starts playing different tunes, I'll see you on the dark side of the moon. And The Lunatic is on the Grass. It's all about Sid, really, Brain Damage. For anybody who's interested, the piece of grass to which I refer, The Lunatic is on the Grass, is very, very specific. It's a quadrangle of mown lawn between King's College Chapel and the River Cam in Cambridge where I grew up. So so it's absolutely about that particular piece of grass that probably had "Please keep off the grass" written on it. Eclipse arrived in the middle of a tour of England in 1972. I remember arriving at the gig, having driven down from London. We weren't all travelling together in a bus or anything. We would just turn up at the gig. Pete Watts would be there with the gear and it would be set up. And we turned up at the thing and I walked in and I went, but I've written the ending. Oh yeah? Yeah, it goes like this. All that you touch and all that you see and blah, blah, blah. Played it on a guitar. And I think we did it that night. It comes after Brain Damage. Oh, all right. And that was the end of it. This is it. You make what you can of it. You need to make the most of it because all that you do is all your life will be, this is it. It's happening, you're living it. Get used to the idea and enjoy it and make the most of it. And if you're a warmonger, stop being a fucking warmonger. Stop killing people. There's nothing to be gained from it, except a bigger slice of the cake. So you'll get fat and die, But when you could be smelling the roses and helping your brothers and sisters and sharing your love of life and of everything. That's why I remade this record, because it describes our predicament in exactly the same way that it did in 1973. It's 50 years later, so I'm saying it all over.